When I was first starting out, I wanted to get as much advice on the craft of writing as I could. For the most part, it was because my confidence was so low, as it should be, and I was desperate to find that key piece of advice that would unlock the secrets of the trade. And I never found it. Instead, I found a lot of tricks that worked for some and not for me. I found a lot of debates on the best way to write and a lot of contradictory advice. I've found in my searches and in my travels and in all my research, I have found only one thing that you need to do. And I will tell you what that is at the end of this video. One of the, they kept telling me, right by the seat of your pants. Your characters will tell you what they want. Or write a detailed outline and leave nothing to chance. Fill out a 30-page questionnaire on each character and include all the hobbies and pets and opinions on pocket lint that you can put in there. And I don't know. I tried some of it. This is what I found. Most writers preach their gospel of storytelling because they found something that works for them. And the mistake is thinking that because it worked for insert famous author's name here, then it will work for me. The discoveries that these writers preach, their advice that they're giving is real and it is earned. But what most authors are telling you is what worked for them. Nothing is wrong with that except for the fact that it's framed as some kind of a law and not a suggestion. No one author has the absolute way to tell stories, and you won't either. What you need to understand is what I had to come to understand. You need to learn what works for you. So early on, I would search far and wide for advice. And back in my day, that meant spending a lot of time at the library. And I must have read 100 books on the subject. I grasped at every method as if it were law, and I applied it to my writing, only to find out that it didn't work in practice. And most of it, anyway. At one point, I had read about an author who filled out a form that was about 10 pages long, and he would fill out everything on that list: pets, hobbies, political beliefs, religious beliefs, some of which I would instinctively know about my character, and other things were pointless, like high school sweetheart's name and first car, favorite football team, first date, state they were born and raised in, social security number. And it made a D&D character sheet look like a sticky note. The problem with 90% of this guy's character sheet is that it didn't apply to an orc named Schlarg, who lived in a medieval parallel universe and worked for a wizard. It just didn't work, and it didn't really matter, most of it. So I just tossed that advice. But other stuff stuck with me. I read a book by a woman who wrote mysteries, and forgive me, but it's been a long time, and so I don't recall her name. But she talked about how she would construct her stories by scenes that she saw in her head, and she put them on index cards. And once she had a story's worth, of ideas on those index cards, she would lay them out on her bed or on the floor and arrange them in ways that made sense to her, moving the characters' romance at the lake to before the gruesome murder instead of after, and so she kind of used them like a movie storyboard. It worked pretty well for me for a long time, and I still use that method in some of my projects. But and also, by the way, it's used for, you can actually find a modified version of that method on a lot of writing software now. So it does work, and it works for a lot of people. But I would say that 85% of the advice that I had found turned out to be a real duds in practice. And their advice wasn't wrong, it just wasn't for me. Another example, I'd heard that you had to have an outline. You had to outline every twist and every turn, and even small stuff like how they spread peanut butter on toast had to be outlined. And I tried it, and by the time I finished outlining to such detail, I lost interest in writing a story because I felt like I'd already written it. I tried winging it, writing by the seat of my pants. And my characters tried to take over. I wandered aimlessly. The story went nowhere, or eventually it went somewhere. And I had to go back and do twice as much work trying to make the rest of the story look like I had intended that ending all along, and it was exhausting. So I found I'm not a pantser, and I'm certainly not an outliner. I just lay somewhere in between, and I'm okay with that. My warning to you is not to waste years of your time trying to write with advice that doesn't work for you. Slavish adherence to advice is a waste of time. Try it out. If it works, fine. If it doesn't work, move on, toss it. You're not obligated to it. Advice is a possibility, not law. All the writing advice that you find is like a tool in a toolbox. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it isn't right. Maybe it isn't the right tool for the job you're doing right now. If you need a pipe wrench, a bow saw isn't going to do you any good. And I'm not pro this or anti that. I'm not going to tell you how to write. I'm going to tell you that advice is worth listening to, it is worth trying out, and it is worth discarding if it doesn't work for you. Now, here's that one thing that you need to do. The one rule that you must follow. Peter David wrote an excellent book called Writing for Comics. I read it way, way back in the day, and it was one of the most formative books I ever read on writing. Very simple, just a fantastic book, and he's a fantastic author. And I highly recommend it. But the one thing that I pulled from this book is the one rule that you can never violate, and that is you never bore your audience. And that's it. That's the only rule you need to follow. And now go forth and tell your story.